Thank you. Have you ever stood and had to make one of two choices, and you have no clue which choice to take? On one hand, you have the easy choice. You have the choice that everybody advises you to take, the choice that you know the outcome of, and you know where it will lead. The other choice, on the other hand, is what your gut feeling says. And this is the choice that you don't know where it leads, and you have no measurement to tell you that this will get you where you want to go. There are many people in history who have had to make those two choices. And some people took the great counsel and ended up with great results. And others did not take the good counsel and trusted their gut feeling. One of these people was a 27-year-old who led an army of 30,000 people into battle. His name was Hannibal the Great. And he is studied by historians today in military history as well as back then. He was studied by Julius Caesar centuries after his death. He was studied by Napoleon Bonaparte millenniums afterwards. And what he did was he had one of two choices to make. He could either cross the Alps or he could go around the Alps. And where he was sitting in a place where however he got around the Alps, he wanted to conquer Rome at that time. And if he would destroy Rome, he would claim victory for his empire and be a great military leader. If he went to the south and went around the Alps, he knew that the Roman army would be waiting for him there. And he knew that that's where they would engage them. If he went through the mountain, then he didn't even know if his army would get across and through the other side. Because at this time, winter was about to come and there was snow that was starting to fall in the mountains. And at this time, everybody knows that you go home and you come back and fight in the springtime. But he decided he'd have none of that. He decided he would go through the mountain. And not knowing the specific route, he enlisted different local natives that knew the different trails to go through the mountains. And so upon scouting out the best trail, that's exactly what he did. First of all, he took one day and he camped right at the mountain base. And he gave time to scout out the mountain. Day 2, he led his troops up 3,000 feet, and that's where they camped. The second day, they climbed another 3,000 feet. And by the 8th day, they reached the pinnacle. And that's where he gave a speech. And the ride up the mountain, the climb up the mountain wasn't so easy. It's like saying, okay, you're at the base of the Colorado Rockies. Now, how are you going to get across the Colorado Rockies in 16 days? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, 16 days. He led himself and 30,000 troops across the mountains in 16 days. The peaks were about 12,000, and there were valleys and rifts and terrain that was not so comfortable for them to go across. And also you have to factor in disease and dysentery also, because there's no place for 30,000 people to go to the bathroom, and like camping, where do you camp? There's so many things, so many obstacles that you'd have to overcome to get across the mountain. But this leader, boldly, that's exactly what he did. And it wasn't an easy feat. He lost 12,000 men in the process. And by the time they got across the mountain, they were very, very exhausted. On one hand, he did climb the mountain, and him and his soldiers did cross the mountain. And on the other hand, he did lose a lot of his men. He lost, beyond his men, he lost a lot of his horses and a lot of his elephants that came across with him. It wasn't just him and his soldiers, it was his supplies, his combat troops, everything that went with his whole train. He brought them across. But he caught his opponents off guard. Livy says that the Romans didn't even expect him to come across that way. No army has ever done that before. No army has really done that afterwards. That he was the one person who decided, I'll go through the mountain, and I would rather incur the costs of losing my men there than losing by going around the mountain and losing at the Romans' hand where they expect me. And because of this, that's why he's such a great tactician and great military general, is because after he crossed the mountain, he surprised the Romans and devastated them to a degree that even Romans centuries afterwards could only whisper his name, and he was not mentioned in history at all. Because once they defeated his empire, they destroyed all the books and all the history that has to do with Carthage. And that's why now, today, we don't know that much about Carthaginian history compared to Roman history. And the Romans are the ones who actually wrote history going forward. So that's why there's Latin, and people still study Latin today, and things like that. So the Carthaginians ended up not being successful. And the one person that could defy all the odds was Hannibal the Great. And he surprised them to the extent that history now recognizes him as one of the great leaders of that day.